Hello. Oh, excuse me. Of course, mic comes on and I'm coughing. Not a good sign, but we're not canceling. Mm-mm. Hopefully, you'll tolerate my voice. Thank you for all of you coming in. Thank you, mods, for coming in to help me out on such a later stream, not our usual time. And I appreciate, especially my mods, with all their patience lately in the having to remove and reschedule and change things around so much because of stuff going on in real life. But I will say this: there's a lot going on not in real life too. Although it's real, very, very real, what's going on in true crime in multiple cases. And we've got three of them for you tonight that have some updates. And, well, they are two of them we covered last time we tried to stream, which didn't go very well. That I was interrupted multiple times with phone calls and dogs and walk-ins and etc. And it was unavoidable. But things have settled down just a little bit, and I'm hoping not to get a phone call or a walk-in or any kind of emergency in the house while this happens. So tonight we're going to go over two of the cases that we had already talked a little bit about. I think it was more than a week ago. We discussed a little bit about Courtney Clenney's recent hearing, and there's actually more that happened after that. And also Paul Caniero. We brought you up to date because he was supposed to go to trial, starting jury selection on September 8th. And, well, since you didn't see me streaming a trial or talking about it, I guess you kind of know that that didn't happen. And I've got an update on all of that. There's big doings in that case also. And also, Rex Heuermann, Long Island serial killer from Gilgo Beach, the Manhattan architect who is being charged with 7 murders. All bodies discovered years ago, buried years ago, I should say, Long Island. And that's quite the case with lots of legal precedents going on. I would say that there are legal tidbits that are quite fascinating in all three of these cases tonight. So I'm very excited to be bringing them to you to update. So on that, let's go with our first one. Well, let me just check the chat real quick because I'm very excited that people are here. I do want to say one thing. Thank you so much for all the private messages that I have been getting for those of you that have sent support and concern on everything that's going on in real life, but also to those of you that have been reasonable in my DMs about recent things that have been going on in the media. Because to be honest, I haven't been out here much because of some of the unreasonable things that have been going on. And I just want to say that for those of you that are offering support and kindness and operating with a sense of grace, I applaud you and I appreciate you. And I'm ever grateful to have those of you around me because that's the only way I can continue to do this. So, on that note, we're going to start with Miss Clenney. Now, let me just bring up all of my paperwork on this one. Now, Courtney Clenney, this case is out of Florida. And Courtney Clenney recently had a hearing, and she was trying to get the whole prosecution department in Miami-Dade County disqualified from the case and have the whole case moved out of Miami-Dade County. This is years later. Okay, we're well into this case. But based on, remember the laptop and the separate charges that were, definitely dropped. They dropped them. Oh my goodness, why won't this just open? Okay, wait a minute. Okay, I was doing it the wrong way. Sorry. I'm talking to myself as I try to open a file. My apologies. They dropped the charges against the mother and the father and Courtney for witness tampering and for withholding evidence based on a laptop that the Courtney parents had found in the shared apartment of Courtney Clenney and Christian Abu Sami. Abu Sami. I'm sorry. It's that kind of day. My apologies. I'm not clipping it. We're all human. Anyway, in Courtney and Christian's shared apartment, they found a laptop after the apartment was released back to Courtney and her parents. When they took all the evidence they wanted, did their investigation, they returned the actual apartment premises back to the defendant. And then they found this laptop. And of course, they tried to see what was on it. Courtney Clenney saying since she had the password, no, this was obviously a shared laptop. Perhaps she bought it for him. Perhaps they did mutual things on it. But the majority of the stuff on it was from Christian. So the prosecution is coming on the light that it was Christian's laptop. That's how it's being labeled. And also Christian's family, who has a civil lawsuit, is also saying that that was Christian's laptop and demanding stuff from it, but they have to wait until the actual criminal case has been resolved. Now, the case was dropped because, well, the previous head prosecutor, Quinlan, looked at one document that was called like a strategy document, and we'll get into that. Well, anyway, he said he wasn't going to use any of that. He was then, they filed motions on the defense side, and he was going to have to be deposed. So he stepped down from the case, as he should, to put walls up and to eliminate any, mispropriety. He didn't know what was going to be in the information that he found on the laptop, but he may have seen some attorney-client correspondence. And he did admit to reading one document. Well, that all was the reason that evidence can't be used. It was sealed. It was, the prosecution department itself, actually put it aside. Nobody else looked at it. It's been quarantined off. The judge has ordered it destroyed. None of it can be used, yada, yada. They go forward. The defense tried to have the whole prosecution team removed based on the fact that they had contacted Mikhail Quinlan in the office. He still is a prosecutor, and that they could talk to him anytime about what he read. The judge kind of denied their motion based on the fact, like, there's got to be some common sense here. Like, they're not going to do that. They're not going to violate the principles of law. They're not going to go behind the scenes. Yeah, you can speculate that it's possible that something like that happened. Well, they have actually removed themselves from any conversations. They're all working on separate cases. They've had no conversations beforehand deliberately. They already set up, walls of communication against it to prevent any accusations of inappropriateness. And the judge was satisfied with what they did. But here's what happened after. Because, well, Courtney's team is really not leaving it at that. They're not very happy that they will not actually change the venue. They will not dismiss the prosecution team. So what they did was file a motion to dismiss all the charges. And this is big. Okay, we just got a trial date for December in Courtney Clenney last time we spoke. At that hearing where the judge sided with prosecution that they had done enough to stay on the case and it was moving forward. But lo and behold, here comes another motion from the defense. Now they want the whole case tossed for inappropriateness on several issues that we're going to discuss. Now, they just filed this in the beginning of September, and they're going to be hearing it, hopefully. With this particular case in Florida, they don't necessarily hear everything at the next hearing. They don't rule on it. They have motions. They wait for phone motions. They got different dates. Courtney Clenney's hearings have been scheduled to be every month to keep everything on track, but they have been canceled routinely for different reasons, back and forth, and it has caused quite a bit of a delays. Well, the first thing that the actual defense is listing as a reason to toss the case is a Brady violation, failure to disclose a witness, and Brady violation is the failure to report some kind of misconduct on a police officer, some investigation misconduct they're happening somewhere else, or something that happened, or whatever. Because law enforcement testimony is taken by a jury as, very profound, so to speak. It has a lot of weight. And so the Brady situation is to make sure that they're not getting over the weight. Like that, if anything does happen, that they're actually disclosing it. But this one's rather unique because there was a person by the name of Arthur Cobb. And they are actually saying, based on an article that we found on Radar Online, that the witness was concealed. Nobody ever said anything that he was there. Arthur Culp is a resident of the same building as Clenney and Abumsali. And, you know, he was like a first person there. There's critical testimony. Culp witnessed Abumsali wailing on Clenney in days before his death. This is all being disclosed in the defense's motion. Okay. And nobody's talking about it. Apparently, the defense found out that the prosecution knows about this, that law enforcement knows about this witness, Arthur Cupp, that it's a Brady violation because Cupp approached responding officers at the scene, but prosecution never disclosed his existence to the defense. In other words, when this all happened, he lives in the building. He said and gave a conversation with the officers at the scene. This is huge. If it actually happened the way the defense is saying it happened, of course, we still need to hear from the prosecution. They have time to file their response. The judge is going to weigh it out. But this is not good. Doesn't this sound like uh-oh? I mean, I'm reading it and it sounds like uh-oh. Like seriously, uh-oh. Okay? Now, as I say, like the legal significance of this is the eyewitness testimony of abuse will support Clenney's self-defense claim. We've seen lots in the media, and believe me, I don't want to go in on my opinions of the media right now because, well, I'm not. But I will say that on this particular case, we have seen nothing but abuse on the Clenney side. Clenney actually berating and beating on Abumsali repeatedly. Or they just love to throw these clips, throwing the defendant under the bus. And I don't know where they come from, whether they're leaked from the prosecution or the media just gets a hold of them because they have been circulating. But that seems to be all we see out there. No instances of Abumsali raising his voice or any contra claims. We don't see it. Now, that could be because the defense may have that evidence and they are going to present it afterwards. Because remember, they don't have to put anything out. They don't have to present a case. They don't even have to certify the case the way Courtney Clenney's prosecution team does, saying they're ready for trial, saying they're done through discovery and all of this other stuff. They don't even have to do that. Okay? Well, we don't see anything that they have to defend us about the self-defense. The only thing we have seen because of a court hearing that we did and covered was the demonstration with the pig carcass about how they were going to contest the medical examiner's testimony about the knife wound and the improbability of it being thrown from 10 feet away because of the angle of the wound and the estimation of what that knife was, how long the blade was, how deep this wound is, the angle of it that went in and caused his massive bleeding and his death. Now, the legal significance is strong. And of course, the defense is going to push on this. All right. The defense's position is that this witness could have helped Clenney's defense, but was deliberately concealed. They are accusing the prosecution of Brady violation and severe misconduct here. Okay, now that's just number one. Number two, they got a Youngblood violation. Now, the legal violation under Youngblood, Arizona versus Youngblood, is the precedent case. Police cannot destroy potential exculpatory evidence. In that case, there was destruction of evidence. It was done by the police. It was really had the case tossed. And so this would be considered, under that president, a Youngblood violation in Florida. You know, Danny Del Val, another witness. Uh, he's a civilian witness and first responder to the scene. It's not clear whether he lived in the building or why he was there. When they say first responder, they just mean first showed up. I do not believe that he was an EMT or no, but I have to actually read farther into the document, which, as you know, is very difficult to get out of Florida, but I'm trying. The evidence that was destroyed, that Danny Del Val actually took these photographs and videos taken before police and EMS arrived. Now, that statement here, from what's been reporting, is in the filing of the defense. That leads me to believe that he was not a first responder as EMS or police or regarding to them at all, but just somebody who responded first. Play on words there. So, first on the scene, he was advised by responding officers. Not just advised, he was ordered, according to the defense, to delete all recordings and photos. Now, you say, well, they don't want reporters doing stuff. They don't want it out there. They don't want evidence like dispersed everywhere. If that was the concern, they could have confiscated his phone, downloaded what they needed, got his permission to download the photos and everything. And maybe they did try that. We have to wait for the prosecution's response. I have to read that, because maybe they did ask him for permission to confiscate the phone and download the materials, and he denied. And at that point, they ordered him to delete because he's not entitled to have that. Okay. And, barring getting charged for obstruction or not obeying a police officer, maybe that's when he did it. Not wanting to turn over his phone for whatever reason, or not wanting to turn over all of this stuff. But he wasn't really entitled to have this stuff outside legal proceedings. Okay. Now, it's exculpatory value. It's actually, for the defense, they're probably drooling at the fact that they could have seen the scene before anybody touched it. Okay. Maybe some things that Courtney has been saying are evident there. Okay. And then after EMS came in and the life-saving things that were attempted to be done and the police walking all over the scene, things got moved around. Maybe there is some exculpatory evidence in these photographs that are going to help her. One part that is definitely being reported and in there are Clenney's first words upon help arriving. What she said to the officers and all, actually documented from a third party. Raw footage of the scene before the police contamination, and blood spatter patterns potentially supporting self-defense. What if there actually is a blood spatter pattern that could say the knife came from 10 feet and was tossed and wasn't something right in front of him and plunged down, as the medical examiner is testifying to? You know what? I can understand why the defense is drooling over this, because that is really important evidence. Wouldn't you agree? I mean, to me, this is hot. Exactly. They should have preserved the scene as best as possible. Yes, and they did. They had to make a spot decision. Exactly. And if you wouldn't turn over that phone, that's why it was destroyed. But now they're at risk, right? Why didn't the cup dude report the whaling to the cops when he saw it if it was days before? Well, that's the just thing. They're saying the police do know about it. And that's how prosecution knows about it. Maybe they're saying, I don't know if it happened before, but they are saying that on the scene, Cup did come forward and talk to them. That's what the filing says. Yep. Well, they're not calling a mistrial, Mrs. Cassandra, but they're trying to get the proceedings halted and tossed. They're saying that if the prosecution made these kinds of violations, they can't go forward with the trial, that the whole thing is corrupt. Yeah. And, they could win. The next thing is that they're going to bring back up the laptop. Okay, they're not done. Remember, I preceded this whole conversation with the talk about the laptop on purpose, because number 3, the main issue in the filing of the defense is that the attorney-client privilege was violated, that Team Courtney Communications and that the prosecution had access to privileged group texts. That they had a group text communication channel called Team Courtney, and that now they know that those were accessed, not just the document. Okay, although Queenan has actually admitted to reading the Courtney checklist of things to do, privileged doc. Okay. The participants of Team Courtney Communications channel were Frank Prieto, Sabrina Puglisi, who are our 100 defense team, their paralegal and investigator, Courtney herself, and her parents, Kim and Deborah Clenney. Okay. The privileged contact access included defense witness testimony strategies, expert witness plans, financial obligations and defense funding, complete defense theories and case strategy. That's a big one. They weren't entitled to that. And attorneys' thoughts and opinions on the case. Forget the typo. They're going back to it, saying it wasn't just a document. All right. The prosecutor did admit to reading this document, Courtney checklist of things to do, and he resigned from the case in March. Okay, he's still in the prosecutor's office, but he stepped down because he read that, be deposed. And he spoke to the judge, and he had to attend the hearing and spoke to the judge on what he read, what it contained. But the defense is going through further accusations because in the cloud, accessed and opened in the laptop, where everything is stored, was this communication channel. Now, can they prove that he actually read any of it? I have no idea. But because they actually went into it and it was there, is that going to be enough? Is that going to be enough? And what is the judge going to do about the other two things? I mean, seriously. This is really, really getting complicated. Okay. Now, we're supposed to be getting another hearing, okay? And basically, it had said something about going over, making sure that they're ready for trial, and a last date in November for plea negotiations. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that the plea negotiations are going on. It doesn't necessarily mean that the prosecution has made an offer. Okay, with this kind of a filing, I don't know if they will or they won't. I do know that they have to answer. Okay. The judge has already earlier had dismissed the motion to disqualify the whole prosecution office, the state attorney's office. It does remain in attack. There are still the two prosecutors, that were on the team from before. Kathleen Hulk has been on there from the start, but Sean Abelhoff, who was on it before and then stepped down, and Cahill Quinnan took over. He's now come back. So, Quinnan stepped down and Abelhoff took over as the current lead prosecutor. The former lead was Cahill Quinnan, who stepped down in March. Right now, we still have the same judge, Laura Sharon Cruz. So she's seen all of this, which is good because it's not going from judge to judge, and we got the same one going through. And she's seen all of this. She's been a part of it with dismissing the charges against the parents for the computer hacking and, obstruction and all of that. And those charges against Courtney also. Now, in the August, I think it was the 19th, or maybe the 20th hearing, that's when we set the trial date of December 1st. But that was before they tried to throw the whole case out again. Now, just because the motion to disqualify is denied doesn't mean that this isn't a really serious motion coming forward. And I don't know when we're going to hear that. I would assume we would hear it at the end of October, the beginning of November. Now, October 15th, there is a status check scheduled, which is the regular October hearing. And they were going to, it's also scheduled, and that's where that plea negotiations thing was labeled. That just means that's the deadline for putting predetermined stuff out there. It doesn't mean that after that date, you can't have plea negotiations or anything. Like at any time, they can do that right up until trial. And we've seen it happen during trial. So, it doesn't mean anything except for these pre-things that are doing. It's just a check-in on the judge, on the status of where things are, that they have to do them by certain dates. And that's all that is. And I'm wondering if that's too soon, October 15th, to hear this motion. I guess it depends on the state's response. Now, on November 20th will be the next felony sounding date, which is the final pretrial conference. But with this motion out there like this, and also with motions being able to be appealed, depending on how they are, there's two scenarios. The judge could actually agree to this motion and just toss everything. The prosecution could appeal. And if the Supreme Court decides to hear it, fine, in the state. But it would have to decide, they would have to think there's some legal merit there for it. And it could go the other way too. The judge could deny the defense's motion and just go forward with the trial. Both the defense could stay the case by appealing it if there is some legal merit to it with the Supreme Court. And once it goes that they're going to actually be looking at that order and that ruling, then the time clock stops. And then we have to worry about whether we're going to get a trial on December 1st. But yep, that's where we are with Courtney Clenney. Let me just check you for some actual. Did it have a line in that strategy document about planting a strategy document in a place where the prosecutor? Well, you see, I don't know, because I don't know. I think they may have already thought the laptop that they had it. And I don't think that they knew that everything that they did was going to be in the cloud based on the laptop settings. So, but that's funny. Very funny, Liam. Like, it does give a valid question. I will give, like Liam says, he says, I know that they have to try every route, but if you are trying this hard for a jury to not hear your case, it may not be a case which you want the jury to hear, just saying. I do think that, especially under the battered spouse, that, laws they're going to, and we all know from prior history with the Boone trial, how hard that is for the defense to get in, because they need an aggravating factor. In the defendant is going to need to take the stand to say what they are, because nobody else was there. Same thing with Boone. Now, that is going to be on, will a jury believe her? Is she credible? She's beautiful. She was an OnlyFans model. She was really rich before all of these. And they're going to hear testimony about how, well, entitled she felt and how she mistreated someone. I think they got a lot to judge her on. I think it's really risky for her to take the stand. But in order to do this defense, isn't she going to have to? It's going to be interesting. This is a very interesting case because of this, the legal ramifications. And I do actually agree with Liam. Like, it sounds like they are throwing everything they can. I will say her defense attorneys are well earned their keep. Okay, every penny. This case has been delayed. They have gone through every angle. I mean, it's really hard. I mean, let's just look at it, at the bare bones facts. When the police arrive, she's covered in blood. She admits her fingerprints are all over the knife. She admits that she's the one that caused the knife wound. Just how they think it happened is the problem. Whether it was accidental or in protection, justifiable, or is it murder? Justifiable or not? Legal terms. Justifiable meaning she was being attacked. She was triggered. She was thinking she was going to get hurt. Um, Accidental. She tossed the knife at him to keep him from coming at her. She did not intend for him to bleed to death, but her actions did cause it. These are not whether she actually caused the death, because there's no doubt that Christian Abonsali is dead because of the actions of Courtney Clenney. The legal part of that is, to what extent will she be punished for it? Under under what mitigating and aggravating factors are they going to put in there? Because she knows she did it. She's saying she did it. She's not walking out saying, "Oh no, not me, prove it." She knows that she is contributing to his death. Well, they're coming up with the reasons as to why the jury may have some mercy on her and not think it was purposeful murder or an intent, or she was in a blind rage or whatever. That there was self-defense, that she was scared, that she just flicked that knife over to keep him away from her. That's her story. And that it went in at such an angle that he bled to death. That she tried to get him help, that's evident. We've heard that. Was she hysterical and not very good at any of it? Yes. She wasn't the best at getting him the help. But there was also delays on the apartment managers going in there after hearing all the screaming and everything. That's part of the civil suit against the actual apartment management, the owners of the building, and security, because they could hear all this fuss. Nobody tried to intervene. They could have started to get something done well before EMS got there. But that's another case. So, without any other questions, I think I'm going to get ready for the next one. Let's see. Mrs. Cassandra said, Boone is self-defense as he's locked in a suit. Yeah, I know. Hands and all, right? I store my data in a supercell. I know. People that use the cloud be dangerous. It's the cloud that makes acid rain. Yes, and very messy court trials, Mipit. I agree. You set traps, Grace. I would have on my information. Yeah. You flipped knives before, Anna, and you only accidentally stabbed yourself? Well, I'm sorry you stabbed yourself. Actually, not good. Not good. We don't want that, But yeah, then you know how hard it is to do a downward angle into somebody's body. Then I guess by flipping a knife, which was actually what the actual defense will be saying with the pig, that it was possible, but the medical examiner was quite clear that it wasn't, and that's why she was denied bail. And when we did the bail hearings a year, 2 years ago, that was. Liam says, the parents, we are suing you for not taking our psychotic daughter seriously. No. Well, yes, they are. But Abasali's parents are the ones that are suing the apartment. I do believe that if she is acquitted, that her parents could sue, like you said, Liam, but maybe you misunderstood. I mean, Abum Salih's the civil case by his relatives. They are saying that nobody intervened, knowing that there were arguments going on between the two of them, knowing he was being abused. On the day of the incidents, there was a delay, that they heard everything going on and nobody approached the door, that they were outside discussing it for some period of time before intervening. And that's part of the civil lawsuit case that's going on, which is pending after the criminal is adjusted. All right. After it's adjudicated, rather. Okay, back. Let's talk about the next one. Which, well, we are back with Mr. Paul Caniero. Now, Paul Caniero was due to have his hearing, his trial was scheduled for jury selection on September 8th. And that didn't happen, of course. Because what I'm learning lately is anytime they tell you that something's going to actually uh, okay, somebody's going to actually go forward with the trial. We've got nothing but delays, and it's been happening like a lot, a lot. So let's see. In the Caniero, the reason that we've got the denial, let me just bring up the actual filing if I can, because that was the actual important, the really, really important part that I needed to get to on his case, because more has happened. We've got so much. Remember, we were going over the evidence 2 weeks ago, and we were talking about how the defense, since the defense is, there has been a lot going on in the state's public defender's office in New Jersey, in that county. People were stepping down, new heads were being directed. He ended up with a new defense team, and his new defense attorney, the lead, Monica Massoloni, she's very good. She's filed immediately a slew of things that she found wrong with the case immediately. I mean, this case is 7 years old. 7 years old, 2018. Okay. And we're still, and of course, it's not come to trial yet. Now, most people would say, oh my God, that is just like so too long for a case to be out there. And in a way, yes, but we're going to get to that because that came up also. Well, in discussing all of the evidence, they went over, we had the arson expert was challenged with their own arson expert about whether it was a low smoldering fire or a high heat fast fire, in back and forth on that evidence. In the defense lost that motion. They also challenged the ballistics. Very important. Remember, the victims, his family, Keith Caniero, his brother, Keith Canero's family, his wife and 2 children, stabbed and shot. Jennifer and Keith shot. Keith shot multiple times. Okay. Children stabbed. Jennifer stabbed. They're going over the ballistics. They didn't like the ballistics expert because it's a detective. He's not, certified in this, that, and other thing. So they had this big fry hearing in regards to whether he could testify in regards to the evidence because of his expertise in the situation and what he was going to put forward. And that went back and forth for a while. And the last time that we talked about it, the judge was leaning like it wasn't going to come in. And he wasn't going to let the expert testify, but all the evidence could. The gun, the bullets, where they found them, people that found them could testify to it. And that's where we're at. We have the detective reporting on the ballistics and the summaries of the tops. All of that's coming in. But we don't have a separate expert, like somebody coming in from outside of it to relay the scene. But the detective adequately gave the information to the judge about what he felt happened on the case, and he had enough experience on the job, and he was able to adequately give the information to him. And the judge ultimately decided it's going to be up to the jury whether they find it credible or not, or they believe it coming from the detective, because they do have the bullets, they do have the gun, they're allowed to present anything. There's nothing wrong with how the evidence was actually secured or tested. So they're going to go with it. So that's coming in. But we did talk last time about how the DVR tape, they had a snippet of a tape of Paul Caniero actually turning his DVR system off. And you might say, big deal. It sounds like it's not. But when you add it with his testimony that his power was cut previous to that, and there was something wrong with his DVR house alarm system for recording, and that's why there was no, from a certain period of time on a very certain date when he actually required an alibi, why that would be missing, that was his statement. And then, lo and behold, they find this DVR in a shed on an offset of his house, which was also arsoned and burning on the day of the incident of the murders of the family. That the prosecution is alleging he did as kind of a cover up to try to say like the whole family was being targeted by a mafia thing. Okay. That house was set on fire with his own wife and children inside, although they all did escape. They do have evidence of video from surrounding neighbors of Paul Canero's comings and goings. But this particular piece of evidence was very, very important because it actually caught him in a lie of his testimony. It was visible, and it would mean a lot to the jury to see him doing it. It showed intent to hide his actions, like something might be going on here. But the judge tossed it because of the way the warrant was written. Now, the way the warrant was written and didn't include this little shed offsite where they found it. Okay. Even though, okay, I should also let you know that he did give permission for them to look at this evidence and to take it. Once they got it and held it, they asked him and he signed off that they could have it. But the judge had issue because it wasn't in the warrant, in that first taking of the system was a violation, and he tossed that evidence. And that kind of made Judge Lamo, he's like the main judge here in Monmouth County in New Jersey. Okay. He didn't like the idea. He said that even though there was a fire going on, they had time to actually put out a search warrant. They should have properly included everything. And several pieces of evidence have been tossed because they weren't included properly. And even though it was the day of the fire and their other building was on fire and all, he thought they had sufficient time to amend that. Prosecution disagrees. There's a fire going on. You can't do that to the law enforcement. They disagree hotly. They disagreed so much that they appealed to the Supreme Court to pick it up, the Superior Court, to pick up the appeal. The appeal, well, there was an issue recently from the Superior Court saying they would hear the appeal for the prosecution team. Christopher Decker won that, and it stayed the case. It stays the time on the case, too, which will be important in a few minutes. Now, the Supreme Court appeal process on it. The New Jersey Supreme Court granted that state's motion for leave to appeal on the 3rd, setting an expedited schedule. The state's brief is due tomorrow on why they feel that the judge's ruling to toss the evidence of the DVR out wasn't fair. The defense's brief in response to the state's brief will be due by October 1st, only 2 weeks later. And they are scheduling oral argument from both sides for the beginning of November. Now, here's what I found interesting. The Supreme Court decided to bring this up, and it decided to take the case after their lengthy review of whatever. That under circumstances presented, this is the question. Under the circumstances presented, where the defendant's house was on fire, was the warrantless seizure of evidence from the garage justified under the exigent circumstances exception to the warrant requirement? Imminent danger is one, they're saying it was imminent danger of evidence being destroyed because the other house, the front house, the main house was on fire. And this garage is, although separate, on the property. Now, the judge had said in his ruling that at that time, the fire was under control. The prosecution is saying the officers don't have the knowledge to actually say that everything's under control at the time. Everything is still chaotic. There's still fire trucks everywhere. There's still all this noise. How? What? Like, no. They acted justly and prudently to secure evidence. And so it'll be the Supreme Court to decide that. But in the meantime, everything has stayed in this case. So we didn't have jury. We had a hearing, though. We still had a hearing. And that was really interesting. Other rulings that the defense lost, they didn't get to move the venue in this case, okay? They didn't get the financial information tossed, although it has been limited to just the things and the dealings between the two brothers. The prosecution is leading with their case that the motive for Paul Caniero to kill his brother was that he was being discovered as defrauding him and stealing mass amounts of money, and it was going to be very, very bad. Paul Caniero had another lifestyle. He was paying for another woman besides his wife. He was stealing money left and right from a trust that he was the trustee of in Keith Canero's name. It's big stuff. We're going to hear video, not video, but audio conversations between Paul and Keith, but we're only going to hear Keith's side of it because they did not have on the home recording Paul's side of it, and actually the secured devices, the way that they were secured, we don't have Paul's side of it. Okay. They are going to actually, the defense did win partially their motion to exclude the Apple Watch and the laptop and stuff like that, all these electronics that were secured by the officers of Paul Canero's when they went to his home to question him. However, they didn't win totally because the prosecution is able to use everything the day before and the day of the incident because it shows where he was, conversations he's had, motive in the heat of the thing. So it was like they both won and they both lost there a little bit. Okay. Now, this key evidence of the DVR, the prosecution, I've not had a prosecution go like this in quite some time about evidence being tossed. I mean, they usually squawk, they do another brief, they do their oral arguments with the judge, they do what they can, but then to bring it to the Supreme Court, they really think they have an issue here. And it is an issue of precedence on warrantless seizure because sometimes officers are put into a situation where they cannot get as detailed as you want. And Judge Lameau, during this actual case, has been very persnickety about warrants and stuff. That was the issue with the Apple Watch and the electronics. They said they weren't specific enough as to the type of information they were looking for or the time frame, and that he felt he had to narrow it down himself. It was overly broad, you know. Judge Lameau knows that this is a big, high-profile case. And you can tell by his rulings, he's being very stern to both sides, very much, and sticking to the letter of the law. He doesn't want an appeal. He doesn't want anything overturned. He's being really rigid on things so that when and if the prosecution does get their conviction, that Paul Caniero won't be overturning it or actually appealing, having any legal issue to appeal. They're addressing them all beforehand, it looks like. Now, what came up in the recent trial? Well, not trial, I mean the actual hearing. You know, it was scheduled to go on September 8th, but now we're going to have it on January 5th of 2026, in the beginning of the new year. This murder case, 4 murders, thousands and thousands of jurors were summoned. It's going to go all over again. But it's halted, and the time is halted on the case because of the Supreme Court deciding to hear the prosecution's appeal. And I am very interested in that appeal. I want to see where that goes. But the hearing on September 13th, Judge Lameau also denied Canero's motion to be released on bail because he's been in jail for over 6-7 years. And he's being denied his speedy trial. And yes, I'm chuckling a little bit because the motions that the defense has filed repeatedly have delayed this trial over and over and over again. All of the delays, or I would say at least 90% of the delays, besides COVID that they couldn't avoid and everything else, are due to the defense. Okay, so wow, that really took a lot of, gumption to actually file that one. But yeah, they tried to get him out. He said no. He said no. He's staying in custody, and we're not tossing the case because he doesn't get speedy. It's halted. But because the date would have been, I think it was September 17th, would have been the speedy trial date. And, they had the hearing 4 days. I mean, you got to hand it to the defense team, right? I mean, way to earn your money. Definitely earning their money there. Definitely. And they're public defenders. I mean, she's really knocking it out of the park. Everything they can. Anything that's on the table, all possible. But no, he's staying behind bars. So Mr. Caniero will not be getting out to await his trial in January. Okay. Well, we're going to hear more about what actual evidence is going to come forward for that trial. Trust fund attorney. Yes, he was, Anna, and he was his brother, and he stole from him. Like he also stole from disability. As he did all of these, there's another little part of this under fraud. That there's some other things going. That he was paid for work he did for his brother through both businesses that they owned together under his wife because Paul Caniero was on disability with the state. I kid you not. Like, yeah, he don't got a lot of good things going for him. If the jury gets to hear all of it, it's going to be really, really bad for Caniero. Well, that's why the defense is really hammering in and really like concentrating on all of the stuff that they do here. I mean, they don't want all of the personal stuff coming in or anything that's not relative to the actual murder. It would be prejudicial. As far as 404B information, financial stuff, and things like that, the judge has ruled that those pertaining to the motive and state of mind are coming in. You know, hints of Murdaugh trial here. A big push towards the stress of being found out as a monetary thief, stealing from your family and everybody else, pushed him to murder in this plot. Sound familiar? I think we've heard this one before. And we know how that went. But the judge is being as cautious as Judge Newman was in that case, hearing everything up front and deciding and picking, choosing through it what can actually come in and what's not, you know? Yeah. Isn't it fascinating, Anna, how they do that? They delay, and then they go, hey, wait a minute, speedy trial. You know, Lori Vallow did the same thing. I can't attend trial because I'm sick. But, oh, yeah, I'm appealing because you violated my speedy trial rules. I kid you not. Yes. Yeah, making me shake my head. But, you know, they're going to do what they're going to do. They're going to try. They got to do it, right? Like, it's the nature of the beast. It's the nature of the beast. All right. So, this is the prosecution's position on that DVR evidence, and it's good. Like, I'm really interested in it. They're brief and everything going on. The prosecution argues that exigent circumstances justified the warrantless search and seizure of the DVR system. Officers responded to an active fire at 5:04 a.m. on November 20th. A partially melted gasoline can found near the garage fire indicated suspicious intentional arson. The fire created exigent circumstances requiring immediate action to preserve evidence. The DVR contained surveillance footage that could document the arsonist's activities. Remember, Paul Canero's also being charged for the arson of both homes, his and his brother Keith's, in an attempt to eliminate evidence to the murders and supply an alibi for the murders. Okay. They're saying that DVR surveillance could have had arsonist activities. And they're right. That's why they wanted it. Under Michigan versus Tyler, the precedent, fire scenes create per se exigent circumstances justifying warrantless entry and seizures of evidence. There is precedent set here. This is not the only case. I found 8 cases where a fire on the property caused the police to seize evidence without a warrant to protect it, preserve it. And the majority of those were won. The defendant voluntarily consented to the search of the DVR contents through a signed consent form. After they took the warrantless search of the garage and then they got the evidence, he actually signed that they could look at it. They got permission. I think that's going to weigh very much on their side. Although Judge Lameau said it didn't matter. It didn't have any right to go get it. That was his sticking point right there. The state maintains that both the initial seizure and subsequent searches were constitutionally permissible based on the exigent circumstances of the fire. So we shall see, but hopefully we will hear about this by the end of October. Hopefully, because our trial date is January 5th of 2026. Have they charged him for the fraud? There's a separate case on that. It will come up in this case. Certain parts of it are charged, not the disability claims. But there is a life insurance fraud charge that is part of this case, because they're saying the reason he stole some of this money, that they found out about him stealing the money because he wasn't paying life insurance premiums that the trustee was supposed to be paying to secure Keith Canero's life. It's why the trust was set up, to pay life insurance and things like that for the future of his wife and his children if anything should happen to Keith Cannero, the brother. And his brother Paul was supposed to be handling these, but he stole the money that was put in there for the life insurance instead of paying the life insurance premiums. And that part of the fraud cases is in there. Does that make sense? Okay. So on the next one that we have, just let me have 1 second to wet my whistle. Okay, so let me bring this back up. Oh, you found my rare Charmander there, Shill. Thank you. That one makes me happy. All right. Next, to recognize this gentleman, this is Rex Heuermann. This is a case in New York, the Southern District of New York. Ray Tierney is actually handling this case. He's got a massive investigative team. Commissioner Stanley had actually started it. They brought in all kinds of experts and detectives and FBI, everybody that they could, in regards to the bodies that were found along a strip in Long Island. Okay. This is the Long Island serial killer, Manhattan architect, the alleged Long Island serial killer, Manhattan architect, Rex Heuermann. Now, this case has been going on for a little bit, but the last that we talked about it, we were still going through a Fry hearing, again, back and forth on whether DNA evidence would be admissible because of the type of testing that was done. And the type of testing was very advanced, genome testing, on rootless hairs that were found on 6 of the victims. And the testing was done in an outside lab in California, Austria, and it was new technology, never in a court system in New York State prior. This hearing went on for a month and a half, 6 weeks. They had a hearing every week, once or twice a week. Lots of witnesses, lots of experts. I know we've talked about it before as the witnesses were being presented. We talked about the scientists. We talked about the professors. We talked about the science a lot. So I'm not going to go back into that. This is going to be the summary. So let's get to it. First, I always want to, as I have done with the other, you saw a picture of Christian Album-Solly. You saw a picture of the Caniero family that are the victims. I do want to acknowledge the 7 victims in this case. Rex Heuermann is accused of the murder of Melissa Bartholomew, Amber Costello, Megan Waterman, Maureen Brainerd Barnes, Jessica Taylor, Valerie Mack, and Shannon Gill. Charge. Oh, actually, no. Those are the bodies that were found. The charges for Jessica Taylor, yes, in for Valerie Mack, but there was another woman, Sandra Costello, not Shannon Gilbert, that is actually charged as the 7. Okay. Now, I don't know why they put Shannon Gilbert in there. It should be Sandra Costello, which is one of the older bodies that were discovered, or the oldest part of the case, the older crime that is being said, because there's a lot going on with this case besides the DNA. This is Ray Tierney. We've shown you him before. Now, Suffolk County Judge Timothy Mazzei, he actually delivered a landmark ruling early September, I believe it was the 3rd, on the critical DNA evidence obtained through advanced, like I said, whole genome sequencing technology that was to be used by the prosecution in the upcoming trial of Rex Heuermann. Now, it was quite a long decision. I think it was like 29, 20, or 30 pages. And it actually set precedent because it's the first time that this decision marked the first time such advanced DNA analysis techniques have been admitted as evidence in a New York court. This actual ruling is about the DNA results that were extracted from, like I said, those rootless hairs on 6 of Heuermann's victims: Maureen Brainard Barnes, Megan Waterman, Amber Costello, Sandra Costello, which is the picture that was missing from the prior, and Jessica Taylor, and also Valerie Mack. The advanced testing was performed by California-based Astria Forensics using whole genome sequencing technology. Now, this technology examines 100,000 DNA points compared to traditional methods that analyze maybe 24, which makes it very valuable to the criminal system for evidence in regards to older DNA or DNA that has not been preserved adequately. For this to be actually put in opens up the ability for numerous cases to be reinvestigated and tested, and for more advanced technology to be used to actually give DNA evidence in cases. Now, DNA evidence, juries like it. They don't understand the science behind it a lot, and they hate talking the gobbledygook. But when it comes to, can you prove if somebody was there? It does. Juries like that. It proves they were there. It doesn't prove they did it, but it proves they were there, which is part of getting to they did it. So, I mean, there's no denying that juries love DNA evidence. I love DNA evidence. And I love the science and the actual precedents that are being set in multiple cases that I am following in the advancements in DNA technology. We saw that in the Caniero case, where the new technology out of New Zealand with StreamAx was actually took another month-long hearing and was finally admitted in. And that is where minuscule type of mixed DNA from 2 or more parties could be separated in analysis as to who they were, which is a big part of the Caniero case based on blood spots that were found on his jeans that were found in his basement that correlated to one of the children, on his niece or his nephew, and himself. How does the blood get intermingled? The blood gets intermingled because you had contact with the victim. You had, shall I say, bloody contact with the victim. That was brilliant precedent set it there. In the first time in New Jersey, the whole state, not just the county. They flew the man behind the technology in New Zealand to New Jersey to speak on it to the judge, and it took a long time to come to that decision. But that is also another profound DNA decision this year. Okay. In the conclusion of his summary order, Judge Mazzei concluded that the defense experts simply provided no empirical proof to refute the validated empirical evidence provided by the prosecutors during that extensive Fry hearing. Okay. Ray Tierney, of course, was over the moon. It's a decisive victory for him and his team, and it's sure going to help them with further identification of more victims. They still have other unidentified bodies. They have other identified or uncharged crimes that this DNA is going to help filter through. You know, he said that they're able to prevail for one reason, and I like this reason. The reason he states that they prevailed is because science was on his side. I like the sound of that. I think science and legal go hand in hand. These are definite things. Okay. Now, the defense the defense didn't take it sitting down. No, 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 no. Of course they didn't. Of course they didn't. Okay? Oh, that's the other one. What the defense has done to actually throw a monkey wrench into this case is, well, okay, I have to get the wording of this right. So, like, forgive me. It's not funny. It's definitely not. It's definitely not. Immediately following the ruling, Heuermann's defense attorney, Michael Brown, expressed disappointment and then proceeded to file a new motion that very night, challenging the DNA evidence on different grounds. Oh, well, you think the science is good? Well, let me come up with another reason why you can't use it that I didn't mention before. Oh, by the way, the defense now argues that using Astria Forensics violates New York public health laws because the California laboratory is not licensed to operate in New York. And it is a for-profit entity. Now, they went over that during the case that the evidence doesn't care if they make money on running the tests or not. They don't. But Michael Brown tried to say that the scientists were biased because the company that hired them makes money. He didn't really prove his point, not with the judge. But I'm wondering what they're going to do here and what the actual law states about whether Ray Tierney can use an out-of-state lab that's not registered. I think they can. I hear about them using out-of-state labs all the time. But I don't know about New York. New York has some funny laws on the books, so we're going to have to see where this goes. But Michael Brown didn't take it sitting down. No, no, no. He's fighting for Rex Heuermann, and he wants that evidence tossed. I don't blame him. It is the one thing that keeps them all together. And it's also interfering with another motion that he has. Now that the judge has said that DNA evidence can be used, it's really interfering with his other motion to sever the case. Now, yes, he wants all the cases separated. He wants five different cases, not one, because of mass prejudice. Okay. Now, this is unresolved. He filed this in January of 2025, and the judge has not ruled on it. One of the reasons was because of the major piece of evidence that was listed in the prosecution's pleadings to keep the cases together was this DNA evidence that tied multiple victims to Rex Heuermann with the same evidence of hairs. And that would be the hairs of his family members. Okay. Now, the motion is trying to seek separate cases rather than one consolidated trial for all of the 7 murders. It argues that the killings differ significantly in the timeline, which is true, method and victims' profiles, which is not necessarily true, making a joint trial potentially prejudicial to the jury. No, there's not a lot of significance difference. He's worried that if you think there's a lot of evidence for one of the murders, then of course the jury is going to think, well, they'll let it slide that there's not so much on the others. Well, he's a serial killer. And this is legal turmoil that happens often in the prosecution of serial killers. What they have to do is prove the same motive, prove the same type of killing. The bodies are all located in the same location, the dump method. Many of them were following the same body type and lifestyles, the same pattern of how he met them and how he disposed of them. So there is a lot of precedent there for keeping it all together as a serial killer case. However, they're going to push forward with these. You know, they are worried about juries being prejudiced, and I think that's a valid concern of theirs. A jury for one murder is one thing. A jury for seven, all at the same time, that's going to be hearing evidence on all seven at the same time. You're not coming out looking too good there. They can't help but be somewhat prejudicial. Now, I know our process is not infallible. We all know that. Okay. But in his actual brief, Michael Brown gave these like are the key legal arguments for severance. That temporal separation argument, meaning the time, cumulative effect prejudice, one murder versus seven, of course they're going to be biased. Substantial disparity in evidence. That's not true. The amount of evidence in each case is different. The types of evidence is a little bit different, but the MO stays the same. The preparation, the things that he did, how he contacted them, that's all very similar and kind of ties from one to the other. There are circumstantial evidence concerns. Say somebody says they saw, let's say, the green truck in an area at a certain time, that because there's multiple cases and a witness say they saw it in regards to murder number one, just the evidence of him driving down the street for murder number three as circumstantial evidence will get a heavier weight by the jury because of the evidence in murder number one. Do you see where I'm going? Like if somebody, like, they don't have the same exact evidence, but they might give more weight to circumstantial based on what they hear on the rest of the case. The contested DNA evidence, well, that's why that was before the argument came through that the judge sided with prosecution and kept the evidence in. The heinous nature creating prejudice, well, that's going to happen anyway. That's going to happen anyway. If you just took one of these murders, they're pretty heinous. Him doing it regularly, of course, that adds to it. It's going to contribute to a bit of bias. And yeah, different victimology and methods. They were not. It was progressive, and that's what serial killers do. And Ray Tierney has laid out a timeline on how we progressed with it. It was with evidence taken from Rex Heuermann's basement in his own document on how he does this, how he progressed, how he allegedly wrote notes after the murders on what he could do better, what worked, what didn't work, how he improved, and how he changed step by step. They don't want that in altogether. Now, the prosecution's opposition, obviously, as no, they're not that separate. They are inextricably intertwined with evidence. DNA, burlap, disposal methods, where the bodies were found, how he procured them, how he found them, how he contacted them, what he did the same in every single case. Common planning document is the huge one, which maps out many, not all of the victims that are charged, but several of them. The geographic and methodology are consistent. They were all in the same area. He had access to them. They were disposed in the same method, in the same area, yada, yada, yada. The decision is going to significantly impact the case trajectory, as separate trials are going to, well, throw a big monkey wrench because they're going to require the prosecution to prove each case independently, prevent cumulative prejudice from multiple victim testimony, potentially weaken the prosecution's serial killer narrative, because, that's a big one. That's a big one. Juries are going to look at you differently. Significantly extend the overall litigation timeline. It will be years before this is done. Years and years and years and years. And that is not justice for victims. They've already waited a very, very long time. The court has scheduled several key dates for this September. September 17th is the return date for the defense's new public health motion. Prosecution also will certify the case. Now, in New York, when a prosecution certifies a case, they say they're ready for trial. That's kind of what it means. It's the same thing that they say, are you ready for trial? And you have to prove it to the judge for the prosecution to stop the clock for speedy trial. In New York, they call it, they call it to certify the case. And that means that the key aspects of the prosecutor's certification will include that he has completed his discovery obligations. The impact on the speedy trial clock will be stopped. I mean, it means he's gone over the witness statements, police reports, 911 recordings, electronic and physical evidence. He's turned everything over. Okay, he's done his due diligence and acted in good faith, and he's ready for trial. It's all about 2020 state discovery reform laws that were done, which links discovery to a defendant's speedy trial rights. So it's just to make sure we're ready for trial. You're not holding anything up. There's nothing that's going to interfere, and we're on track for the dates and times for speedy trial. Now, if you when you file this certification of the case, it stops the clock. So no matter what happens with the motion, to sever and all of this, the speedy trial clock is stopped, and so there won't be any motion that those needs weren't met and we should dismiss the case. But it's not a promise of perfection. Things can still come up, It just certifies that the prosecutor has in good faith done everything that they can. If they discover new information, and this could be key, because there has been a discovery of some women's clothing and all in Jones Beach, which was a site that Rex Heuermann worked on when he was younger. And they're having it all tested, but it's not part of this investigation. Ray Tierney, in his wisdom, had stopped the investigation to the 7 murders he has charged, because if he kept the investigation open, he could never meet the discovery deadline. Like, the discovery deadline would never end, and he would never be able to certify the case for trial. You see what I mean? This is why it's listed separate. Now, if they actually find anything that directly implicates Rex Heuermann, they can start another case in regards to what they have found on Jones Beach. And that's only if it's related. But it does seem to be a lot of identification and clothing and women's purses and things. And they are saying that it's being reported that Rex Heuermann had access to that facility and that ability, and they found it during some construction or whatever. It's been there for quite some time. So it's going to be quite a while before they go through all of it. It's tested. It's not being tested under this investigation. That I can tell you. Ray Tierney actually put out a statement on it. And the reason why, because if they don't close that investigation into these cases right here, discovery can't be completed. Makes sense to me. I hope I didn't lose you in that explanation. So by September 22nd, of course, the DA's office, Ray Tierney, is going to file his response to by the way, Astra is in California, and you can't use them. We'll see what happens there. And then on September 23rd, Judge Massey is going to issue decisions on both the new DNA motion about where the lab is located in public health law in New York, and the long pending motion to sever the cases into separate trials. So by the end of this month, we should know if we're going forward or not for our trial date. And so in a way, that's good news. Judge Massey is all over it. I mean, this sever the cases one has been going on since January. But understandably, the DNA part of it, the DNA evidence part of it, was a big part of the decision that Judge Massey would make. So I truly understand why he took his time and he wasn't going to consider that motion until after that. That makes sense to me. I don't understand like people that are saying, oh no, they should have just decided anyway. No, you can't, because you don't know if that evidence is coming in or not. And that evidence is definitely a huge part of the decision process. That evidence links the 7 bodies together. And the prosecution, of course, would want you to consider that evidence. So, of course, the the defense attorneys don't want you to look at that evidence or consider that evidence in the sever, because if that evidence was out, it would be easier to sever the cases from the defense's point of view. They would want a point there. There's nothing linking everybody together concretely. DNA evidence kind of does, you know. Will this one be streamed? Well, no. It's New York. Nope. No, we don't stream criminal cases in the state of New York. We're going to have to follow up like I do with weekly summaries. Unfortunately, we have quite a few of those coming up that are that way. But we'll keep you up to date on all of them and offer you everything that we can is that becomes streamable as far as hearings and etc. Okay, so I'm just going to look for messages. Oh, I see we're passing coffee out in the chat, and gosh darn, that's a good idea. I definitely need some of that. But I thank you all for joining me. Basically, we're going to wait and see what happens at the end of this month in regards to Heuermann, you know. But with all three of them, there's a lot going on, is there not? I mean, we just had to redo Clenney and Caniero based on, you know, that's what happens. I'll be done with this Heuermann update and we'll have more information in a week and I'll be right back with it again. But that's how it is, bit by bit, week by week. Now, I do have some other cases I'd like to discuss with you this week. Tomorrow, I usually do the What the AF legal. And I do plan to do it. But the case that I want to talk, it is a legal case. But I want to talk more about the media, so I hope you'll join me. I will give you a trigger warning. It is something that's hotly contested in the media right now. And I am not very happy. I am disenchanted with the behavior of millions. I am disenchanted with the media and some public figures. And I know nobody really cares about that, but I think there's some things that need to be said. And I think that this case may be a way to say it. So I'm going to put my toes in the water tomorrow and see how you all feel about it. But I'm not into torturing you people. I like you. I like that you're here. I like that you watch my little true crime streams. I like that you comment. Most of you send me private DMs. I wish more of you would comment on the back of the videos. I think your opinions are valid and your questions are good. So don't be so shy. Put them out there for everybody. Let's get more than just my opinion, you know? But I do not want to torture you with something that's going to bring a lot of heat to anyone, you know? So, but I am going to talk about it a little tomorrow. And if you think I'm hedging, I'm not. We're going to talk about the shooting of Charlie Kirk, the media's response, in the social media response, the repercussions, and the current court proceedings in regards to the shooter, Tyler Robinson. Yeah, and what the charges are. We're going to keep it to that. Okay, and so that's my trigger warning. You know what we're going to talk about. And a heads up for my mods, and for those of you who are listening in advance, we don't tolerate any nonsense in the chat. You can have valid opinion, but you better keep it cordial. You better keep it on the up and up. I don't want to see no words. I don't want to see no blaming. And I don't want to see any inappropriate behavior. Call me what you will. It's my channel, and that's how it's going to be. I'm not going to tolerate it. There's two sides to every story, and I'm not going to support either one in my chat. You got it? That's how it is. Thank you, guys. Thanks, Mrs. Cassandra. I appreciate it. And, you know, for those of you responding in the chat, I appreciate you. I really do. I know I'm kind of quirky in the way that I do things, but I always do things the way I think is best for me and for what I want to I hate taking streams down because of others' behaviors or things like that, and I don't want to do it. Like, I don't want to do it. I think it's an important conversation to have, and I want to be reasonable about it. I want to approach it like we do all other cases. Okay? So with both sides. So I'm, I know I'm going to get some flack for it because I already am about not taking sides. People say that about me all the time, but this is true crime. And it's up to the jury. You got to get into the courtroom. That's how we look at it, right? But there's things to discuss. And that's what the second series is about. The things we can't go into detail here because we want to remain as unbiased as possible. And true crime and legal updates is based on the jury's perspective on the whole process. And then we get to the final court case in how the jury sees things, what gets presented. We follow it from A to Z all the way through. But the one tomorrow, that's a little bit different. That's where we get to talk about the things that just make us shake our head and ask why and what is going on here. Things that I don't cover all the way through to the trial. Civil cases, weird stuff, people just misbehaving or misusing the court system. And because of the recent actions of the media, I think it's pertinent for tomorrow. Well, Friday, I'll be doing another one because also Luigi Mangione had a hearing, okay, and Barry Morphew had a hearing. So I know I'll be talking about those two on Friday and maybe whatever else I come up with that has happened in the last couple of weeks. I have been trying to keep on everything and keep my notes up. If you're in my Discord, by the way, you do get these updates. I post the articles. I post stuff that's going on. I post the filings. So even if I'm not doing a stream, I'm keeping everybody as up to date as I can. I'm trying to keep on top of everything. It's just been a little difficult to come out here and summarize everything all at once. But I'm on it. I'm going to get caught up. Yeah. I agree with you 100%, Mrs. Cassandra, and we can talk about that tomorrow. 100%. Absolutely. So I want to thank everybody for being here for this hour and a half. I'm going to be cutting this in a minute or two. I want to say that we're on multiple platforms. We're on YouTube now and Twitch and Kick. And if anybody wants to join the True Crime Discord, that's a Twitch follower or a Kick follower, just DM me or message me what name you're under on those accounts, and I'll get you over there. Okay. And I'll get you in there to look at all the filings and look at the rooms of the current cases. Okay. Because it's not just for YouTube. It's you guys too. Much smaller platforms over there that I'm trying to build, but I welcome you all if you'd like more information. It is a Discord server. In Twitch and Kick users are pretty astute with Discord, so I don't think you'll have any problem getting around in there. Just send me your IDs and how it correlates to Twitch or Kick following so that I can verify it and get you in there. So on that, I'm going to say good night. I'll see you all tomorrow. I don't know what time it's going to be tomorrow yet. I'm still going through the schedule, but you know what we're going to be talking about. And for those mods that are going to be there with me, I thank you. And I thank you again for your support and your patience. You guys are awesome to me. And I truly, truly appreciate it. For all of you watching later, don't forget to comment if you've got anything. I want to hear it, whatever you have to say about the cases. These cases I covered tonight or any of the other cases. Please, we're open to discussion and questions, and I'll try to get you answers. I will try to get you information or explain something I said that you didn't like or you did like. Whatever. I appreciate the conversation. That's what I'm here for. So on that, good night, everybody, and I'll see you again soon.